Hi and welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman. Today I've been working on some foundation strip piecing and I came up with another fun little pattern that I wanted to share with you. So this is part 2 of my foundation scrappy strip piecing. And I am working on the tote bag yet. I've got to get the pattern completed. I have been gone this whole week with lecturing and workshop and some other family obligations. So this is Saturday. I'm finally getting back to some foundation piecing, but this was a fun little block that I put together. I did use, again, my used dryer sheets. So that's what I'm using for the foundation. As I had mentioned in part 1 of my foundation scrappy strip piecing techniques, you may not choose to use dryer sheets for your family, and that's fine. You can certainly use paper. I have an old Uline catalog here from which I can rip out the pages and use those. I'd probably cut those in half so that I could create the foundation upon which I will be sewing all of these little strip pieces. So let's take a peek at how I did this. And this kind of represents a brick wall here to me, and I think that's probably what I'll call it, the scrappy brick wall quilt. Basically each of these bricks is made with a dryer sheet, some tiny little strips of scraps, and then I've shaped each one with, or sashed each one of these with red fabric, and that just happened to be a fabric that I had here on hand quite a bit of. You could use black or white or gray or whatever you choose to use, but I happen to use red for this. So now let's find out what I did with my used dryer sheet to accomplish this. So what I wanted to do was have a grid in the center of my dryer sheet. So I'm using a 3-inch wide ruler, and I've literally folded each of these dryer sheets in half lengthwise, and so I have a fold in there. And I'm lining that fold up on a certain line here on my mat and using the center line of my 3.5-inch ruler, and I'm lining that up on that fold. Now what I'm going to do is literally just take, this is a Mark Be Gone pen. I'm using the blue side, the Mark Be Gone, and I am going to draw a line down each side of this 3-inch ruler, and I'll do that on both of them. It's hard for you to see it here, but you'll be able to see it better when I put it up on my machine. So let me move the camera over so that you can see that. I decided to grab a piece of white cardstock, and I'm laying the dryer sheet there. Hopefully you can see the 2 lines that I have drawn with this pen. Now what I'm going to do is literally cut strips of fabric that are about, this is 3 inches wide. I'm going to cut my strips of fabric about 3.5 inches wide, and I'm going to get them all ready to go right here. I have an entire tote of lots of strips, and so I'm going to go through and grab those. I'm going to lay them out here in front of me, and I'll show those to you in just a moment. So you see here I have about, I don't know, 10 little strips here. They vary in width from maybe 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And I just have them all laid out here. I've got some lights, mediums, and darks, just an assortment from this bin here that I grabbed. And I've cut them about 3.5 inches in length. And now I'm going to start placing them on my used dryer sheet here, and I'm going to start sewing them. So I'm going to lay this first one right side up and just a little bit off the used dryer sheet, so it's just a little bit off the edge. And the next one here, I'm going to put it right sides down, lining it up with the edge there. Now there is a line, and let me grab my cardstock again so that you can see this line. So I have the 2 pieces lined up on the used dryer sheet. Here's the blue line, here's the blue line. I'm going to start sewing at 1/4 inch right there, parallel, right next to that blue line, 1/4 inch down, and stop at that blue line. I want to start and stop as close to that blue line as possible. If I go a stitch or 2 over, that's all right, but I want to start and stop as close as possible to that blue line. So let me bring it up here And I do have my stitch length at 2.2, which is a shorter stitch length. All right. And then what I'm going to do is simply, maybe I'll keep it up here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to finger press that open. So that is ready to go. I'm going to grab the next one here, right sides together. I'm making sure that the edges, the raw edges, extend beyond the blue lines, and then when I stitch, I'm going to start right at the blue line and stop at the blue line as close as possible, stitching 1/4 of an inch for the seam allowance. And then each time I stitch, I flip it, make sure that I'm not folding a fold in there. I want to make sure that I'm creasing it nice and crisp, but I'm making sure that I'm not folding or creasing a fold in that. Let's grab the next piece. And again, right sides together. I'm going to start right on the blue line here. My needle is right parallel to the blue line. If I miss it by a stitch or two, that's okay, but I want to try and keep it as close as possible to starting and stopping on that blue line. There we go. And I kind of like my strips to be rather wonky. I don't want them all to be perfect. You may choose to have all of yours exactly the same, and that's perfect. It's your block. You have fun with it. But mine are going to be nice and wonky. So I'm going to continue down this strip, sewing, starting and stopping at the blue lines, and I'm going to go all the way to the edge. All right, so I have the center section of my used dryer sheet completely pieced, and so what I want to do is trim up this excess fabric, and to do that I'm going to flip the dryer sheet over, and I'm going to fold each of these edges down on that blue line, or as close to that blue line as possible, and then I'm going to take a ruler and lay it on here so that I have an additional, I'm laying the 1/4 inch line on my ruler on that blue line, and that allows me to trim away this excess. Let me trim that and I'll show you what I've done. So here's all this excess. Whoops, I missed one right there. Okay, so that's all the excess. So I had placed my ruler on that blue line. I'd folded this down on the blue line, placed the ruler on the blue line, 1/4 of an inch, and then I trimmed away the excess. So now I have a nice straight edge right there. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I am going to flip it down on the blue line. I'm going to lay my ruler on top of it with the 1/4 inch line of the ruler on the blue line, and then trim away the excess fabric. So all of this can go in the trash here. Actually, that can go in my pet pillows where I can put that. So there, now they are straight on both edges. Now what I'd like to do is, I've got some red fabric strips cut, and I am going to trim these to the length that I need. And depending on your dryer sheets may be square, they may be longer than this, they may be a completely different shape, and that's fine. Just have fun with them and create your own design. But now what I'm going to do is measure the length of these, and I am going to attach the red strips on each side. And let me get the red strips cut, and I'll be right back. So I have my strips cut. My dryer sheets happen to be 9 inches long, so that's what I've done. I've cut strips from the red fabric that are 9 inches long, and these are 2 inches wide. That just happened to be the size that I'm choosing here. I'm going to line these up on that raw edge there, and when I sew it, I'm literally going to flip it over and sew it on the blue line so I have perfectly straight outside edges, and then we'll flip that like that. I'll do the same thing over here. I will lay this up on the raw edges, right sides together, and then when I sew it, I will turn it over and I will sew it from the back on the blue line. And that will help to ensure that everything is nice and straight. So I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and get that done, and I'll be right back. I've also cut some strips for the top and the bottom, and they are 2-inch wide strips. I may end up trimming the outside edge when I'm finished, just so that I don't have any of this fat flapping around here. But, and you can certainly do that yourself on your blocks. Or you could just trim away this extra dryer sheet using the same principle that we did with trimming away the excess fabric, just laying this up against the edge and cutting it away. Whatever works easiest for you. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch these on the top and the bottom, and my scrappy brick wall block will be done. Here is the completed scrappy brick wall block, and you could certainly use these to make the tote bags that I'll be finishing up here later on this week. But I think they turned out great. It's a wonderful way to use up your scrap stash and use up all those extra strips that you have in your stash. I'm enjoying this. I actually was able to put each of these, when I wasn't talking with you and chatting with you on putting it together, I was able to sew this entire block within 10 to 15 minutes. So it is something that can be done very quickly. The length of my blocks actually ends up being 12.5 inches, and it's 6.5 inches wide. So putting 2 of these together would create a nice scrappy block that follows my 52-week series of scrappy blocks. The size that I'm doing for each of those is a 12.5 inch square block. And so these would work beautifully if you use 2 of them. So have fun. I look forward to seeing some of your blocks. Please don't forget to post them out on my Quilting with Lori Facebook page. It's the Scrap Up Your Stash group page. Make sure you join that and start posting scrappy blocks that you're working on and quilts that you're working on. We all love to get inspired by seeing the projects everyone is working on. So enjoy that, and I will be back early this next week with the pattern and the rest of the tote bag that I started on part 1 of this foundation series. So make sure you check out part 1 if you haven't seen it. I will have that linked in the description box below, and I look forward to seeing you then next week. Have a great weekend and happy quilting.